Let's start with just take a breath, maybe. Just take a slow inhale and exhale out to sink into the moment. Yeah, the breath always helps, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Welcome to Show Up and Surrender. Conversations and thoughts about life, about the good things and the bad things, and everything in between. Unedited, straight from my microphone to your ears. I'm Biddy, and I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so excited because it's been a while, but it's time for a new episode of the Show Up and Surrender podcast, which is one of my big loves, but also one of the first things that gets pushed to the side a little bit when things get busy. But I always said if I had a really good topic, I would record another episode. And I'm really excited to record today together with someone that I met through my yoga therapy training. And I fell in love with her style of teaching first. And then I found out that she's an amazing person. And I was lucky to start working with her. And then I got to know her a little bit better, got more enthusiastic about knowing her. And then she asked me to become a part of this beautiful yoga teacher training that she has set up and has been hosting over the past year, maybe even more than a year. And we're here today to talk about that. So, the person I'm talking about is the wonderful Manouk. And I'm so excited that we're doing this. Maybe before we start diving into the teacher training, you'd like to just introduce yourself really shortly? Tell us where you live, where you're joining from, and anything else you'd like to share at the beginning of our talk?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Biddy. And wow, I just really want to say I felt that introduction with my heart. Really, it means a lot to hear that from you. Um, yeah, so I live in France, but I'm originally Dutch, but I was born in the UK. So quite a bit of a melting pot in terms of where I'm from. And I've been teaching yoga for, gosh, nearly a decade, I think, and working with the Yoga Therapy Institute now for a couple of years as well. And the whole concept of this 200-hour yoga teacher training that I now run for the Yoga Therapy Institute was really born out of an idea that started a couple of years ago. I was already leading and um, co-training on other yoga teacher trainings, but then what the Yoga Therapy Institute approached me about was the feeling that there wasn't really many authentic yoga teacher trainings out there. There was a strong focus on the aesthetics and not so much of a focus on the human side of being a yoga teacher or a yoga practitioner. And I realize I've already segued straight into our topic of today.
I love
Um,
that though.
Maybe shied away from talking about myself.
You
Uh,
get to segue as much as you want. Don't worry.
but yeah, no, so I'm a certified yoga therapist, a yoga teacher trainer. I've had the privilege of training with some incredible teachers around the world and also living and working myself as a yoga teacher in various different countries. And yeah, now I've settled in France and I still travel, but I'm trying to kind of really, what's the word, nest myself in France. So
Yeah.
we run our teacher trainings in France, although it's all done in English. But that being said, most of our students come from all over Europe. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited that we get to, well, that we get to talk today about it, but also that we get to work together on this because I think one of the things that I've loved about the yoga therapy training was also that people come from all over the world and you get to meet so many new people, but also I think with different parts of the world comes different looks on things. And especially when it comes to yoga, it's such a good reminder that there's so many different approaches and so many different views on everything that we do and share with people. And I love it when you have an international group of people because somehow it broadens up the world even more. So I think that's one of the beauties of these trainings. And I'm so excited um, to do this in person training now because what we're talking about is 3 weeks in person for 200-hour yoga teacher training. And I'm I'm really excited because is this the third time that you're running it or
This will be the fourth time.
the fourth time already? See,
Yeah.
I'm glad
Yeah.
I checked. I wasn't sure. Yeah. So for me, it's the first time joining. So I'm very excited about that. But I think there's so much to dive into. But maybe we can start by talking a little bit about okay, so you get this question, ask if you want to set up this training. When you get to start sort of from scratch, what is the biggest hope that you have going into this?
Gosh, that's a big question, but
Yeah, I thought
definitely,
I'd start small.
yeah, I'll dive in. Um, so I guess what I really hoped for when I went about setting up this training alongside the rest of the faculty of the Yoga Therapy Institute, so I can't take complete credit for everything here, by all means, um, was really this idea of a yoga teacher training that is welcoming for everyone.
Mm,
And I think you also put it so beautifully already is that the Yoga Therapy Institute really brings so many different people from so many different walks of life, different backgrounds together. And the school really facilitates a learning environment, and not just through the information we give you, but also from being present with all these different people from around the world with different stories. And when I was kind of creating this training, what I really wanted was for the people who said, "Oh, I could never be a yoga teacher." Those are the people who I thought those are the ones we want to show up. Those are the people who need to realize that perhaps they could be a yoga teacher. And I think nowadays there can be a strong misconception of what yoga is. I think social media in particular portrays a very misleading idea of what it is to be not just a yoga teacher, but even a yoga student. And, let's be honest, one of the most common question or phrases we hear is, "Oh, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga. I'm not fit
yes.
enough. I can't put myself in those positions with my body." And what this training really emphasizes is much more the deeper effects of yoga rather than the aesthetics. And something that makes us really stand out is kind of how we take a yoga pose and we say, what's the intention with this pose? Rather than the look that we're trying to achieve, what is the intention? So, coming back to your question in a very big loop, what I hoped most for was that people would see this training as a very inviting and welcoming experience rather than something to be feared.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so true that a lot of people have this idea of what a teacher training is. And I think that comes a lot from the fact that a lot of teacher trainings are a certain way, right? And they will market themselves in that way. So you see a lot of marketing with beautiful poses on Bali and stuff like that, beautiful scenery. And then it's very easy to think, oh, yeah, that would be great, but that's not for me because I wouldn't fit into that image of what I see here. And I love how inviting this training is because what you hope for, it shows, right? When I read the website, when I see the text of the social media posts that you create, it almost oozes this accessibility.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. It's beautifully done. And of course, from having worked with you and having worked with the Yoga Therapy Institute, I know how welcome you are when you decide to say yes and when you step in. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to be able to offer as well. So, yeah, I cannot emphasize enough how beautiful that is to experience from each and every side, when whether you're teaching or whether you're coming in as the student. And I think even when you're teaching, you're still learning so much as well.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I just to draw back on some things you were saying there is I often have Zoom calls with people who are interested in doing the training, just so we
mhm.
can kind of connect face to face and have a good conversation and also see if this is the right training for them.
Yeah.
Because there's, there's a huge sea of 200-hour yoga teacher trainings out there. So it can be really hard to figure out, well, what's the right training for me?
Yeah.
And, one kind of common phrase that I often use in these Zoom calls is I say, this isn't a beach holiday in Bali kind of teacher training.
I didn't know you said that. It
Yeah.
might seem so for people watching this recording, but that was new for me.
Yeah, no, but that's why when you said,
Yeah.
in Bali, I was like, well, actually, the thing is that, I mean, I could tell you all the things we are, but equally important is to tell you maybe the things that we're not. And no,
Yeah.
it's not a beach holiday in Bali. And it doesn't mean that that's a bad type of teacher training. That's just a different flavor.
Yeah.
And what we offer is a different flavor. So, I remember some particular students who I had Zoom calls for, and one of our graduates, Mark, who did his training last year in March, when I asked him what was the reason that you picked this training, he said, "Well, of all the websites I visited, yours was the first one that looked like they had real people."
Oh,
And that really stuck with me because like you were saying, it's true. So there's this image created of the yoga teacher, skinny, tall, flexible, female in a lot of cases as well.
yeah.
And, to hear from Mark that he felt, you're presenting real people here, I thought, yes, we're doing something right.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, that's amazing feedback to get as well. Yeah. I think maybe to continue on that, you already said a little bit. That's one of the ways the training is different, but that's more the overall intention, I think. Can you tell us also a little bit more about how this training then is different when people decide to say, go, okay, this is the training for me? What are the aspects that you think might differ from most other trainings out there?
Gosh, that's a really good question. um,
Pretending that we know all the other trainings. I mean, I
yeah,
know that we're generalizing here, so I'm
yeah.
hoping people will forgive us for that. But
Yeah, of course. And again, I've been teaching these types of trainings for years, so I will also admit that I've kind of looked back at all the trainings I've worked on and picked also some of the good bits and brought them into this training.
yeah,
Um, but something that I really feel makes this training unique compared to others is that, firstly, we take quite a non-dogmatic approach. And whilst we do kind of promote ourselves as utilizing or presenting the styles of hatha and vinyasa yoga, we don't adhere or stick to specific lineages. So
yeah,
I think this is important because we take away from this idea of being very instructional in the yoga and saying, this is how you do it and this is how you don't do it. And we say, hey, here's a yoga practice or a pose. And how could we utilize that in different settings to achieve different intentions? Which again kind of draws back to that sense of creating something really accessible and welcoming. And at the same time, despite being non dogmatic, we still uphold a deep appreciation for the roots of yoga.
Yeah.
So we dedicate a part of our curriculum to understanding the history and the philosophy of yoga, and also acknowledging that we're actually trying to practice a very traditional and ancient style of living, essentially, and bring it into the modern world as 21st century human beings. So I think this is something that we feel really makes us unique. This acknowledgement of taking something very ancient and traditional and finding a way to apply it to modern day life.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful because I think I shared this with you at some point. The very first training I ever did was 200-hour critical alignment flow yoga training. And I loved it. I mean, I'm glad that I had that training, but with all the knowledge that I have gathered since and all the experience I've had since, make me look back at it and think like, oh, that was actually very strict. Like this foot had to be here, and your hips had to be in this degree of corner, and it was so strict with all the knowledge that I have now about my own body. Let's just keep it constrict to myself, like my own hypermobile body. That's not the best approach because I got injured quite a lot practicing in that way. So I think it's so important that we get to offer, yes, the knowledge and yes, the ideas that were there, but then also seeing, because it's not just how it fits in this day and age, but also how does it fit to this human being in front of you, right?
Mm,
And
yes.
I think that's such a beautiful thing to be able to learn from the get-go. If this is your first training, or if this is your second training, to dive deeper into learning how to go about that. Because I think that's the hardest thing that I had in the beginning was, okay, so I have this knowledge now. I know that there's more out there. Like, how do I now take the knowledge that I have and put that into the way I teach, into my own practice and into my life? And I get the feeling, of course, I haven't been in the training yet, but we've been talking about it so much that I feel like I have quite a good idea what it will be like. And I feel like there's space for that as well, to not only get the knowledge, but also help people create ways to integrate it into their life and into their teaching, which I think is such a beautiful gift to get
Yeah.
from a training. Because I
Yeah.
think that's the hard thing sometimes, like the translation from knowing something with our brain to actually embodying it and bringing it out into life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, you express it so well is basically we teach people, not poses.
Yes. Yes.
And we find ways to make the pose work for the person and not the person have to work for the pose.
Yeah.
So, I think in the first or second day of the training, we do an introduction to the human body, and we do this exercise where basically the outcome is realizing that all of our bodies in some way are differently shaped and sized, and that
Yes.
doesn't make one body better than the other. Some of us have longer arms, longer legs, some of us are taller or shorter, but it sounds so simple, but it's that first step to appreciating that everybody is going to look different in a yoga pose. And the whole point of the practice is not that we all look the same, but that we can learn how to adapt and appreciate the practice for our own unique self.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and yeah, absolutely. I think something that a teacher training will make you realize is what you learn on your yoga mat can be taken out of the yoga classroom and into your life. So, so often we hear, oh, yoga is a practice that makes you feel calm and relaxed. Yoga helps
Yeah.
to calm and settle your nervous system. And yeah, okay, fair enough. I'm not going to deny that, but I think that's a very two-dimensional understanding of yoga. And what yoga can really help us to appreciate is yoga teaches you how to transition more smoothly between the different states of your own nervous system. So it's not just about feeling calm and relaxed all the time. It's also about acknowledging that, yeah, sometimes we do get stressed. Sometimes
Yeah.
our nervous system is hypervigilant or activated for some reason. And yoga is not going to take that away. But what your practice might help you to do is to notice that experience from a calmer state of being. So I hope there's a little bit of sense in there
Oh,
because,
yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, no,
sometimes
I
I
love
think,
how you put that.
okay, good.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful way to describe it because the amount of times that people have said to me, I think I would love to try yoga, but I think I might not be zen enough," is something I somehow get often. And I think I will borrow your explanation next time someone says that to me. Like it's not about being zen or having to be calm all the time because that's not life, is it?
No, I mean, the truth is that we live in a very fast-paced, busy, overwhelming world. We are all going to face challenges in our life,
Yeah.
physical, mental, emotional, on all different levels. And, the whole practice of yoga isn't going to take those harder moments away. It's not going to take away the challenges, but it might make you slightly better equipped to navigate some of
Yeah.
those challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautifully put. Can you tell us a little bit about the setup of the training and how is the vibe? How is the energy? Because 200 hours is quite a lot of hours in 3 weeks, isn't it? So what can people expect if they do decide to join? What will it be like?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And it also draws me back to how, when I have these Zoom calls with interested applicants, I often tell them what the training not is not. So they also realize it's not a holiday.
No, that won't
Yeah,
fit. Yes.
it's, 200 hours in 22 days. That's, so do the maths. We do cover 200 hours of content in 22 days. That being said, we do have 2 full days off during the training because we believe it is important that there is some room for rest and
Yeah.
integration. But we do present it as an intensive residential experience because you're basically around the same group of people for 3 weeks straight. And we it's immersive. That's the word I'd use to explain it as well. It's a very immersive experience, and we work with quite small groups, usually of around 10 students. And this also gives us the opportunity to provide a lot of personalized support.
Yeah.
Now, we do have a structured schedule just because we find that that structure helps people more in taking in all of the information that we're giving them and processing it. So our days usually starts with a yoga class in the morning at 7:30. Then we'll have a break for breakfast and we take all of our meals together, which is quite nice. Kind of family style as well.
Mm.
And then the rest of the morning, we're usually looking at some anatomy and physiology. We're also doing asana workshops. So we're taking some of the yoga poses, dissecting them, understanding the benefits, the contraindications, some of the general alignment cues, and especially how we can adapt these poses to ourselves. Then we have a nice lunch break of about 2 hours. So we do have, again, just a little bit of a room for rest and downtime. And then in the afternoons, we look at some of the history and philosophy of yoga. And we also look at teaching methodology. So not just the practice, but also how can I start to share some of this information in a very safe and confident way.
Yeah.
And then just before dinner, we finish up with a more gentle yoga class. So we might incorporate some restorative elements as well into the practice. And then we have our lovely family style dinner. And then the evenings will be either some free time or we might do a fireside chat. And again, this is just really important for the sense of connection as a group.
Mhm.
And we kind of see it as the moment of kind of like a sangha, which is the Sanskrit word for community. And we might revisit a few topics that were discussed through the day. We might do a kirtan session. So we might do some singing and chanting. And some days we just also sit around the fire and have a chat about how everything is landing at that moment in
Yeah.
training.
While I was preparing for this, I remember I was thinking back a lot to the first times that I was in trainings and how all this information comes at you and it takes time to settle. And I think it's a wonderful way to have these breaks in between because I think Judith, one of our teachers, says often, like, if you don't have rest, then everything else you do doesn't. There's no point to doing anything if you don't take time to rest and let it sink in and let it become a part of you. So to have those breaks in between and then still have the moments of connection is such a beautiful way because I think also to be able to talk to the other students that are there, right? To dive deeper than just the lectures and just the workshops, but to get to actually have people close by who are going through the same thing and be able to talk to them about it as well. That gives you such a deeper level. Because my first training was a part-time training. So then at the end, you were really tired by the end of the day and you still had to travel home. So you would just, everyone would go their own way. And I think it is such an added value to have just the people close by that you can talk over dinner about the stuff that might have stuck with you or things that you're still kind of like walking around, like trying to figure out what you think about it. It's easier when there's other people there going through the same thing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it was so important for us at the Yoga Therapy Institute to do a in-person training rather than an
Yes.
online training because, you know, let's be honest, so much of training and education has transitioned to the online world since
Mhm.
the pandemic. And of course, there is a huge amount of advantages to this. It's made education more accessible. It's, you know, opened up the opportunity to train with almost anybody around the world, which is
Which
fantastic.
is amazing. Yeah.
However, just as you were, you know, describing the that element of connection and community is something that cannot be replaced.
Yeah.
And what we've also heard from our graduates is yes, they learn a lot from the training itself, but they also get so much out of being in that community and in that immersive experience as a group. And yeah, it's invaluable and it's really something that's, you know, I can try and think of words to explain it, but it's something that needs to be felt and experienced.
Yeah. I can imagine.
But we see also lifelong friendships coming out of it. And
Yeah.
you know, everybody stays in touch. We have WhatsApp groups and, you know, the occasional Zoom kind of meetup as well. But you really create a sense of family when you go through an experience like this.
Yeah. I can imagine. I can imagine. And I think it's so good to hear also that there's still options afterwards, right? Because that was actually one of the things that I was thinking about. So you do this intensive training, and I remember the feeling of after a training, like when you're done, it's like oh, it kind of feels like empty and quiet all of a sudden. But then there is still the WhatsApp group, like you said, and there's always the option to reach out to us as well, right? If there's, when you go back into your daily life and you want to start incorporating this, you've built relationships with people that you can actually also lean into a little bit when you need to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, again, that maybe this is what helps us to stand out from other trainings as well, is just such a personalized approach to the whole experience.
Yeah.
Even before you've joined or officially committed to the training, you can have a conversation with the trainers. You can access the curriculum. You can join a class online and see, well, what kind of yoga am I actually going to experience here?
Yeah.
And then leading up to the training as well, we stay in touch with you. We're already there to guide you. And during the training, you have your trainers, but you also have a peer support. So, the subtitle for the peer support is basically cheerleader. So it's someone
I
that,
love it.
yeah, yeah, just, is there to support the students along the way. And usually this is a graduate of the program as well. So it's someone who's gone through the same experience.
Yeah.
And then after the training as well, we stay in touch. And, for example, I often get asked, well, I'm interested in doing another training, and could you help me find a prenatal training? Or do you think it's worth doing a training in menopause or a chair yoga training? And yeah, I'm there for that as well. I'm there not just for them to do the 200-hour training, but for them to grow and evolve as a yoga teacher, which, as you know as well, it's a never ending journey.
Yeah, so true. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that's definitely standing out from a lot of other trainings out there. And it also makes it a little less scary because I can imagine, especially if this would be your first training, to say yes to a training like this, it might also be scary to think, okay, but that's 3 weeks and then what? So it's good to have the knowledge that there will still be support afterwards because I think from my own experience, those first 3 weeks, yes, you get all the information, but that's when it begins, right? When you come out of
Mhm.
that and you start to think on what you want to do with it. Because I can also imagine that for some people, it might not even be so much about teaching, becoming a yoga teacher in a yoga studio. It might even be maybe deepening your own practice. I don't know. What kind of people do you think are would benefit the most from this training?
Yeah. And really good question. And also just drawing back to what you were saying about this tidal wave that of information and practice that
Yeah.
comes at you, and then you kind of leave and fall into this gap. It's true. So much of what you will learn will actually come after the training ends. And I often compare it to getting your driver's license. So your yoga teacher training is like your driving lessons. So
Yeah.
you have your instructor next to you, you're a little bit more vigilant, and you're in that process of learning. You're driving in the same car. But you actually only really learn to drive once you've passed your driving exam and you're sitting alone in the car or driving different cars, picking up passengers. That's when the experience comes, and that's when you really
Yeah.
learn to drive. So I think it's the same for a yoga teacher training. You really start to teach once the training has ended. But that being said, in this 200-hour yoga teacher training, you're teaching from day one. So from the first day,
Yeah.
you're beginning the process of learning how to teach. That being said, not everybody who takes this training is out there to become a yoga teacher. In fact, I think there have been studies done on this, but the majority of people nowadays taking a yoga teacher training, it's really to deepen their own practice. And, when we look at the trainees that are coming to our trainings, yes, some of them have the intention to become a yoga teacher and to teach yoga, whether that's at a studio or to set up their own business. But a lot of people also come just because they want to learn more about yoga. And maybe they'll teach, maybe to family and friends,
Hmm.
maybe to colleagues. But the intention isn't to become a yoga teacher, but rather to get a deeper appreciation of yoga. And, yoga can be shared in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be in the role of a yoga teacher. So, one graduate that comes to mind in this is Emily, who is a cancer survivor. And she joined the training because she really wanted to implement a trauma informed approach to yoga in her community. And now she is sharing yoga with other survivors of cancer. So that's who comes to mind. Um, who else can I think of? Anna. When Anna first showed up, she was saying, "Well, I don't think I want to teach yoga. I just really want to understand the practice more and I want to see how it can benefit my own health and well being." And now she's gone and set up a whole yoga scene in Munich where she lives. So, yeah, all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life show up to this. And just because you take a 200-hour yoga teacher training doesn't mean you have to stick the label of yoga teacher onto yourself.
Yeah. I think you said something that I think also would be great to highlight. Talked about trauma informed, and I think that is something that also makes this training stand out from a lot of other trainings because there is this emphasis on the trauma informed um, style of teaching, but also the trauma informed setting of the yoga teacher training itself.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I mean, for me now, it's such a normal thing to say, but maybe for other people out there, trauma informed is a vague idea.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good that you bring that up because it is something again that perhaps makes us stand out from other trainings. So, firstly, being trauma informed means that a yoga teacher has an in-depth understanding of the impact of trauma on the mind and body.
Hmm.
And what we're seeing nowadays is that more and more people will have a traumatic experience at some point in their life.
Yeah.
And there was a World Mental Health Survey done back in 2016. And out of this, the results suggested that around 70% of people will experience a traumatic event in their life. But then along came the pandemic, and there was much more appreciation for vicarious trauma. So then, certain mental health specialists started suggesting that it's closer to 90% of the world population that will experience a traumatic event in their
Yeah.
lifetime. So, having this understanding of the impact of trauma on the mind and body is important, especially if you plan to teach group yoga classes, because it's very likely that there will be students in that class that have experienced trauma. Now, teaching in a trauma informed manner means that consideration is taken for not just what you teach, but also how you teach to
Right.
populations where the residue of trauma might be present. So, what we do in the training is really introduce you to a vast range of tools and techniques that can facilitate a healing space in the yoga class setting by enhancing, particularly, the sense of safety, choice, and presence.
Yeah. How beautiful. Also, how beautiful to be given the tools to facilitate a safe space for people. Because I think inherently that is what you create when you work trauma informed. You create a safe space for people to come practice. And unfortunately, that's not a given everywhere. So I think it's very empowering to learn that trauma informed language and to know what you need to be aware of while you're teaching. Because I can imagine also when you hear numbers like that, when you see studies done like that, and you hear 90% of all people, it might even make you, if you don't have the tools, it could be very daunting to then step in front of a class and start guiding a yoga class. So I'm so happy that this is such a big part also of the training and that it's interwoven into the teachings. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's again something that's, I really wonder if there will come a point in the future where it will be potentially mandatory for yoga teachers to
Yeah.
teach or to at least have an understanding of trauma informed principles. So, I'm kind of hoping we're just getting ahead of the times, really.
I hope so too. And the more people that we can bring in touch with it, the more it'll spread out, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's so important to highlight that so often people come to yoga because they think it's a practice that will change them.
Yeah.
But the truth is that yoga just gives you a clearer mirror to see yourself in. And a lot of the healing and growth that we can go through doesn't come from trying to change ourselves. It comes from being able to clearly see who we are and to love ourselves through that.
Yeah. Yeah. That one came here. Yeah. That is because that is beautiful and hard. It's both, right? It can be extremely challenging, but also once you start to feel that, it can change your life in a beautiful way when you get to the point where your practice helps you accept yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's, I mean, if it was easy, we'd all do it, right?
Yeah, yes.
Just like, I always
So
think of
true.
that when people say, oh, it's so hard to meditate. And I say, well, yeah, if it was easy, we'd all be doing it, right?
Yeah. Yep, it's very true.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, speaking of meditate, this was just something I thought of for people who have never really looked into yoga teacher trainings and for who yoga might be, I don't know, a power yoga class or a yin yoga class that they've once been. Of course, we don't just teach asana, which is the poses you do on the mat, but it might be good to also emphasize that it's a full circle yoga training, which means that there's meditation, there's breath work. It's the bigger thing. That's really beautifully put, Biddy. It's the bigger thing. Um, maybe you can say it in a better way than I am stuttering my way through it now.
That's all right. But the reason we might stutter over this is because it's so big, it's hard to encompass it in
True.
a sentence. So,
Yeah.
well done for trying.
Thank you.
um,
I'll work on this before March. Yes.
yeah. And I think this is also where our understanding of yoga philosophy can be very helpful, is to appreciate how the physical aspect of yoga, which we might refer to as the yoga poses or the asanas, are really only the tip of an
Yeah.
ice. And we have our pranayama, which indirectly can be translated as breath work, though again, there'll be very clear differences there.
Yeah.
Meditation, mindfulness practices. Um, but these are things still that we're kind of doing on the surface. So a yoga teacher training will show you also how yoga is not just a physical practice we do on our mat. There's also a lot of aspects that we can incorporate into our life off of the mats, outside of a yoga studio. So,
Yeah.
again, without it having to be dogmatic, interestingly, a lot of the principles of the philosophy of yoga are very human principles to live by, to be kind to the world and to
Yeah.
yourself, to take action in moments where you see, what's the word? Now I'm stumbling.
Injustice?
Injustice, yeah, to take
Yeah.
action when you see injustice occurring. So, absolutely, it's quite wonderful to see how the practice of yoga can filter from what might begin as a physical practice for you, which, you know, the physical aspect of yoga is often what brings people through the door, but the more philosophical, the more intangible aspects of yoga is often what keeps people in the room.
Yeah. Yes. Beautiful. I think I'm almost through most of my questions, but what if someone listens to this and thinks, I'm still not sure? What do you suggest they do? Because you mentioned the possibility of a call, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's so normal for people to sit on the fence when it comes to choosing a 200-hour
Yes.
training, especially if you consider all the different types of 200-hour yoga teacher trainings out there. And also the investment. Let's not deny that it is an investment of
Yes.
time, energy, money. So we do want to make the right decision about this. So if someone is on the fence, the best thing they can do is book a Zoom call with me, which is free and easily booked through our website.
And I
And
will add the link to the description as well so people can
yeah,
find it easily.
yeah, and to just have a Zoom call with me. And I promise you, I won't do a big marketing spiel or anything. I'll just have an honest conversation with you about what our training offers. And I might ask that person their story and what reason they're consider or why they want to do a yoga teacher training. And we take it from there.
Yeah.
This again reminds me of one of our graduates, SJ, and for her the call was the game changer because she said, "Well, I realized I'm going to be spending 3 weeks with this trainer, so I really want to make sure I get on with them." So,
It's so true. It's so
it's
true.
true. You want to be able to get on with the people who are going to be teaching you about yoga for 3 weeks straight.
Yeah.
So, have a Zoom call with me. I promise you I'm a pretty nice person. We can have a
She
cup of
she
tea.
doesn't bite. Yeah.
I know. And I promise you my intention is to help you choose the right training for you,
Yeah. Because
regardless of yeah,
yeah, I can
regardless
imagine also when you think it's not a good fit, you will definitely tell people that as well. And I
yeah,
think
absolutely.
that is very important to know that we're not just taking anyone in because we want as many people as possible,
Yeah.
but we actually want to make sure that you choose something that is actually a fit with what you're looking for.
Absolutely, and that's why we also have an application process, which again is surprisingly not so common nowadays in 200-hour
Yeah.
trainings. You can literally click and buy it. But, we do have an application process, and that sometimes does feel like a hurdle, but it allows us to see what is your motivation for signing up for this training, and does it align with what we offer? Because
Yeah.
if we don't feel we can meet your expectations, it's not fair for us to convince you to come onto this training. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's great to know. I was
Yeah,
thinking it might also be nice in the description to add a link to a online class with you and an online class with me so that you can also, if we piqued your interest, but you're not at the point where you want to make the call, but you'd like to know more, you can maybe try a class with Manouk, you can try a class with me, and then maybe that'll help you get an even better idea of what you might expect as well.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. And if those two classes don't feel like enough, they can reach out to us. And
Yeah.
again, we can have a Zoom call. We both offer regular online classes, so we can invite them there as well.
Yeah.
S- You know, we want to give you as much information and experience as possible, so you that anybody who's considering applying to this training can make the best informed decision.
Yeah. I'm excited. I hope that if you are listening or watching this and you are interested, let us know how we can help you. And we'll, of course, put all the links to the website and everything in the description. And we would love to meet you. It's might be good to just say once, when is it? It is March 10th to the 31st in the south of France. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's at a beautiful retreat center in the south of France. And I've been working with this retreat center for a number of years. And there's a reason I keep going back there because it's just in the most beautiful, quiet setting in the forest, close to one of the most beautiful medieval towns in the south of France. We are also very accessible by train station, so we offer free pickup from the local train station, but we also offer a transfer service for those arriving from abroad. And our closest airport is Toulouse Airport, which is just over an hour from us.
Oh, yeah. I cannot wait to meet everyone there.
Me
Thank
neither. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Minook, for taking the time to tell us a little bit more about it. And it was so nice to talk to you about this. And I'm getting more and more excited because it's coming up pretty soon.
it is. It is. We
Yeah,
still have just a few spots left. And, our past trainings have sold out, which I feel is a very good, sign that we're doing something right.
absolutely.
But yeah, it is coming up fast, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this. And yeah, maybe we can do an after the training podcast just to talk a little bit more about our experience. I would love it if you would come back on the podcast.
I'd love that, Biddy. I'd love that. Thanks so much for your time, and it's been a pleasure to chat.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Show Up and Surrender, the podcast about life made with love for you by Biddy. Music by Alex Stoner through Take Tones. Thank you for listening. Until next time.